some kind of general guidance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my other question is, I'm looking at this chart here. Did legislative post-audit also compare and contrast each of these with the compliance with the transparency portal to find out if those transparency portals have been updated with these so that we could also then cross-check?
We have not compared this to Commerce's, that's on Department of Commerce's website, that transparency portal.
Is that something, Mr. Chairman, that you guys could incorporate, if that would be appropriate to ask, so that we could, I mean, that's a lot, that's supposed to be information that would be very helpful for the legislature, for this committee to know if the things that we're looking at in the audit are also parallel being complied with in that transparency portal, so that we can kind of cross-reference the information is more the thought.
I don't know. I have to think about that a little bit because we want to stay independent, but I don't know.
It'd be more just a check to say, okay, these are the ones that the legislative post-audit recommended to be reviewed. Here is how, and it's not auditing the portal. It's comparing and using the portal within the discussion points to show whether or not these items are consistent with, it's more of a comparison feature.
I think what you're looking for is when the audits are going on, that we get a copy of what the porthole is. Is that what you're thinking?
Perhaps.
So we can compare the two. The only thing about taking the porthole, then you're taking whoever's inputted it as, everything's perfect. And that's, your job is to.
And I agree, Mr. Chairman. So I wouldn't be using that necessarily as your data points, but you would be using them in comparison to your data points. And you would be referencing that this is the data that we have, and this is what we're doing our audit on, the data that we requested from the department. But here's what the portal is showing. So it'd be more of just allowing us the ability to reference back and say, oh, wow, this is exactly what they're putting out on their portal. And it also helps all of us start to use the tools that we initiated through legislation.
Go ahead.
So one maybe consideration here as you guys are thinking about what direction to go is that, so per state law, it's defined, there's kind of 5 buckets of incentives that are within our purview to review. So one of them overlaps with commerce. It's basically I think the wording is any program that's wholly administered or partially administered by the Department of Commerce. But then there's also buckets that are like income tax credits, most income tax credits, which aren't going to be on that portal. Or I think it's industrial revenue bond exemptions, the economic development exemptions, and then there are economic development funds like EDIF is a prime example that comes to mind as there. So some of those won't be on the portal, but the commerce ones would be. So, I mean, certainly if that's the direction that we go and those are the ones you choose, well,
I think
consider doing something like that as part of our work.
I think if it's on the porthole, then we can just maybe snag a copy for reference. But I think that's kind of our next question is to dig down on what we're looking for as an audit. Representative Burrows, you got something to say? Yeah.
Thank you. The thing that's always concerned me is some of these incentives are confidential as to who the recipients are. And that confidentiality, even though most of it's not through the Department of Commerce, the Department of Revenue, has always been one that has been of concern to me. And we're one of the very few states that share that information. That don't share that information, I guess I should say. So I'm kind of concerned. It goes back to the transparency aspect that our colleague is talking about, that confidentiality as to who is using the funds is something that I think we should have access to determine that. Now, I've been advised in the past that the Department of Revenue doesn't want to share that information, and there's supposedly either a statute or predetermined ruling that they don't have to. But I just think that if they're going to use state funds, then they ought to be able to be identified as to who's using those.
You can go ahead and answer that.
I do know that Department of Revenue has some requirements regarding the number of claimants. So I forget if it's 3 or 5, but there's like a certain threshold where if there's fewer than that, they don't report out that information for confidentiality reasons. We would still be able to see that stuff, but we also then have to report it out in a way that is
Right.
aggregated and doesn't disclose.
And, you know, that's, in my mind, that's the reason for the audit is sometimes these little credits get overlooked. You guys are gonna go in there and look at the information. I'm all right not having someone's private tax information that could get out and cause liability to the state. And I think that's probably the biggest concern that, you know, someone might use it or, I'm not saying we would, but you know how things can happen. And, you know, that's what the independent auditors, they're going in, they're looking at everything. They're our eyes and ears. And, you know, sometimes we overlook these smaller credits. And that's the most important thing is you guys are doing it and making sure the laws we set out are being followed.
The purpose of that confidentiality is just what you said, Mr. Chairman, is not to identify the end user specifically, because then we're revealing tax information and revenue information. However, it still should have, somebody should have access to determine that it's not, one, being abused, and two, that we understand that the incentive is either working or it's not working.
Well, I think too, the scope we set out is important to give them the scope we want them to look at. If there is a problem, then there will be a follow-up. Representative Williams?
Okay, my next question is on that, because I lean more, I lean with you, Representative, on that. And I don't think you give personal, if I take a personal tax credit as an individual, that's not what we're looking for, or social tax credit, such as an adoption or preschool or something, childcare, that's what I meant. But businesses, what I like to see is the layering effect. So for example, in my county, if I want to see, are they getting local IRBs? Are they getting star bonds? Are they getting, what different layering incentives are there? And that is supposed to be kind of what that transparency portal was supposed to show. So you could look up by industry, the business, you could look up by county, or you could look up by program, and you should be able to see that. So then my question is, per the statute, the different pots that we could look at, you said we could look at Department of Commerce. Can we review Commerce's implementation of the statute of the portal? Not to say that you'd want that, but I'm just wanting to know, would that be, because the last time I've looked at the portal, it just wasn't there yet. And it's been probably, we're probably pushing 4 years maybe.
My guess, and then I'll let you take it, my guess is that's a 100-hour audit or another audit. That's not these, but go ahead, Kristen. Yeah, I mean, you know, that's just as any subject and very easily doable. But yeah. Yeah, we want to stay. And I think, you know, really to me, yeah, I guess this is just kind of laying the different credits out, but you know, some of the things that I'm thinking, I want to know the investment we made and the investment they made, the job creation. I'm looking more, I've sat on bank board for quite a bit, not currently, but, you know, I look for returns on investment. And, you know, at the end of the day, I don't care who's getting the tax credit. I know revenue's monitoring if it's right or not. You guys are gonna go over there and make sure, you know, the right people are. I don't need to know the details. I just need to know, okay, is this credit really working? Are we investing X dollars, 20, 30%, and they're putting their 70 in? and, it's creating jobs, working like we want it to. So I think that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. I think what we need to focus on probably over the next couple weeks is look at some of the ones we think we need to look at, and then build that criteria of the different credits of what we want you to look at. Good.
If I may, I'm not saying I'm confused, I just want to ensure that we're heading down the right path. So the only agency we're really going to look at in this is Commerce Department?
I don't think, not necessarily, right, Christian? I mean, these are not all commerce.
Right, and that's, we have a tremendous amount of incentives out there, like through the insurance department, and I know that there's incentives for out-of-state insurance programs, and I guess that would be my concern. Then I also see this Friends of Cedar Crest, and I think, is that not a private organization?
Yeah, with your permission, can I, okay, maybe cover, so here's, you're pointing out some, I think, things that are probably good for you all to consider in terms of who's involved and some of the information we've captured here. So it would be, to answer your question, some of these are going to be Department of Commerce, some are Department of Revenue because they're income tax credits, so that would largely be under their purview. It could be the insurance department as well that oversees some of these. I think it's far fewer of them. But so basically, state laws, it gives us those kind of 5 buckets, and then, which I just mentioned, which are largely income tax credits, programs administered by Commerce, wholly or in part. And then you've got IRBX, EDX, and economic development funds. So those are the 5 buckets. One thing I wanted to make clear to you all today is we are not including commerce pilot programs. So we've become aware of some things that are, like an example of one is something called their proof of concept program that they created, and our understanding is sort of a temporary thing. So that is not on the list that you're seeing in front of you today. Those aren't there. The other thing I would point out is we've got, so this is information we compiled for you all last time. We didn't update the numbers that you're seeing in terms of recipients or the incentives distributed. So those are a few years old now. But other things you might want to consider. So that would give you a sense of like how big the incentive is in those number of recipients and total incentives distributed columns. There's also things like sunset dates. So some programs are set to end at a certain time frame, like 2026, I know is for some of them. Not all of them have a sunset date. You'll also see some important things in this notes column, which is all the way out on the right-hand side. I've noted the ones that we have already reviewed. So you'll see red text toward the top of the list are a lot of them that we've already reviewed, either this year or the past couple of years. And then if you flip to the end of the list, so more like pages, looks like it starts on page 5 and carries over to page 6. Those are all newly created incentives. That statute also requires us to review the year after they commence. So as you can see, you all have been busy and created a lot of incentives in the last couple of years. A year after they commence. So we're working on the first set of those right now. We'll have kind of a product to show you. It will look different than like a full audit report just because they are so new. So there's not going to be a ton of data that we can share on those, but we will be doing at least a little bit of something on everything that's numbered like 41 through 53 on the list. We will be doing at least a little bit of something because statute requires us to.
So them are probably ones that we don't have to focus on because they're going to be done anyway, right? Statute requires them.
I think that it's something for you all to discuss. So it's, we could,
Move them out a year so we
Yeah, well, if we looked at them in the first year a little bit and you wanted us to come back, in year 3 to look at it further, all things you could decide you would like us to do. So it's all the things in the middle that we haven't touched. So you might decide, kind of direction I'd be looking for today from you is that something you all are interested in? Do you want us to go back and revisit some of them that we've already reviewed? Do you want us to stay away from those and look at ones we haven't touched?
Representative Williams.
So thank you, Chairman. So as I'm looking at this, can you, Chairman, maybe make a decision, or maybe we need to make a decision on those that don't have any state funding? Maybe we remove from our list of audit. Because there's a lot of these are federal.
Are you talking about like the well plugging fund?
Yes, and there's others that say no state funding. Or for example, the one where they get tax credits because they've already paid for income in another state. There's like 380 million. Yeah, I'm just wondering, almost for us to figure out, is it time to go revisit? Do we have a set cycle that are the predominant players of our tax credits that we should be just cycling through? And what about these other set? I feel like maybe the legislative post-audit, maybe you guys could help us distinguish. This is great, but I'm wondering if some of these shouldn't even probably be in our wheelhouse. And also my second question would be, not wheelhouse, but in our options. My second question is, what are you recommending based on what you just said about all of these items that are going to need some touch or review and the time that it takes? What are you recommending for us to do? And how many?
Go ahead.
So today I'm just looking for that general sentiments, please don't look at the ones you just reviewed, move on to something new, or please focus on the ones that have a sunset and not the ones that don't, or wherever you land, so that we can come back with a specific number. So some of these, we have 4 of them on this list that are newly created. We're reviewing now, and Josh is here, but we're thinking that's like a month of time probably to review all 4 of those, because it's going to be shorter. So next year we have 11, does that sound right, to review? So doing some math, maybe that's a few months of our time that takes to do something like that. But then we've got the rest of that 3-year period. So that's, with your sort of general direction, my plan was to come back next time with a more concrete number of, based on where you all are headed, we think we could do. I say this as an example. If you all wanted us to focus on more of the income tax credits, I think that those will be quicker, because there isn't the economic development component to the return on investment calculations, or some of the econometric modeling work that we're doing now that is really labor intensive and time intensive.
But you'll do if it's a 30% credit, then you'll be able to equivalate what investment was made on the other side, break that down. Representative Burrows.
Let's see if this doesn't help. I'm looking at number 19, Child Care Assistance Credit. We did something about that, I think, through the governor's office or some kind of incentive.
We did that this year in the housing bill. It got put in.
So we have a program here that was established in 1989. We have 0 participants, 0 cash reported. Is that a program that we even still need to have? Or do we even need to audit it? So it may be if it's a 0, that we strike them and not have the auditors spend their time looking at those. So that would eliminate a few of these on here automatically. It's up to the committee, but I might suggest that we have a handful of them here that have 0 participation. There's no return on 0.
Well, in that 2006 one on 22, I bet you that one hasn't always been 0. That's been. Go
Mr. Chairman, so, you mentioned sunset. So if we know that there's something, for example, Star Bond sunsets 2026, well, I would think from a legislative perspective, we'd want to audit finished the year preceding so that we could look at the audit and make a decision on whether or not it's extended or not. So I would recommend that perhaps staff looks at sunsets and always gives us a year before the sunset so that it's reviewed.
I've got no problem with that.
I mean, it's just a thought that if the staff brought that list back and said, okay, you have 5, they're going to expire on 2026. So I would recommend you look at them at 2025, or at least have them on your list to consider. Don't put them in the last year of 2026. That's too late.
So can you give us, where does it say sunset? Is it,
Well, you can
Yes.
see the years.
Yeah, second column from the right.
okay, I see.
Yeah, so there's few that have a sunset, but yes.
There's 2
Yeah, I mean, we can do the sunset ones, that's not a problem, or get them in the schedule to do. See, the only thing I have a problem when you say, if there's 0 spent, there might be 0 spent this year, but not over the life of the program. And like, for instance, I remember Carl Holmes, when he brought 22, that's gonna have like spikes. Some years they're gonna be doing big retrofits at the refineries, and there's gonna be a lot of money spent. And then there's, it might go for 20 years. So you can't just eliminate, I don't know, I don't feel like I can just eliminate one without a discussion, and I think that would actually be a statutory deal, where you'd have to bring a bill.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I don't mean eliminate them. I mean just not have the audit being conducted. And we go after some of the other things that are being discussed. If we show 0 and 0 return, it doesn't mean we're getting rid of them. We're just not having the audit team run through those, because there would be very little to report, I would think.
Well, and, like, some of the questions I have, like on the abandoned well, is that a tax credit? Is that how that works? So, I mean, someone, I guess so much money goes into a reserve, and they're able to take that off as a credit? Or how's all that work? I mean, I just got a question. If that's how it works, then I think you still want to audit that to make sure everybody's doing. They're gonna get the information. And you're gonna read the statute, and anything on something like that that's confidential, we can set the parameters and help you when you're doing the audit. If there's a problem, then it'll come back in the audit. And if there's a problem, we're gonna dig deeper. So I think what we need to do is do you guys want to come back with a suggested list? And then we can kind of work on our own list as an individual. And then I think the next thing, we'll need to set up the criteria for each audit that we approve next time, what we want audited or looked at,
If I can, so I think like maybe if I could get you all to weigh in at least on do you want us to go back and look at ones we've already reviewed? Which would include things like, they're mostly the commerce programs, because they're really clearly economic development related, and they're often the larger ones too, but that would include things like Star Bonds. We're currently reviewing the JCF, HPIP, PEAK, the training programs.
Well, it needs to be reviewed before the sunset, yeah. So, I mean, this is just me thinking right now, because I'm not putting a motion to vote, but I would say any sunsets that we have coming up in the next 3 years, we make sure they're on the schedule over the next 3 years before the sunset comes up. You know, it's important, I get what Representative Williams saying, to have that sunset and what that bill's done, so when that bill's being debated, we can discuss it in full term of what it's done. And if we want to keep it or not, extend the sunset. So any sunsets, I think, you know, if there's one that's in 3 years, we probably ought to look at the audit 2 years or, you know, right before the sunset's going to expire, you know, and see. Is that, go ahead.
My next question is, I know that Commerce does some of their own like evaluations, and they did one of rural opportunity zones a few years back. That wasn't as promising as we would have hoped. Do we want to have staff include any of those, any of these programs that have been already reviewed so that we can have a double look at it? Meaning if that's one that did come up and was reviewed, but not by us, I don't believe.
And I'm gonna state something. I think, you know, if it's something, that's our job to look over the list and think about it over the next couple of weeks. If there's one like that, you know, you got a burning issue, or Representative Burrows or me, I think we should look at it. You know, we're gonna have several, and we're gonna be doing this over time, but I think, you know, so I think, you know, if there's something that's burning that you think we need to do again, on the one thing you gotta realize, they're just gonna compile, you know, if one more year or 2 more years on top of what it's already been done, because there's no use going all the way back, unless you have a different criteria to audit. But my thinking is I'd ask first, the ones we just did, for you guys to kind of build a list. And I really don't want to see an audit only every 3 years of, I think it's a waste of time of auditing an issue every year. So like Star Bonds, I'd do the audit 3 years from the day we did it last time. And so the ones we're just kind of cleaning up, I think 3 years is a good running way of doing the bigger ones. And then I think we pepper the smaller ones in as well. Does that kind of, you know, if it's a smaller one, then I think we can go 4 or 5 years. But the bigger ones, I would say at least 3 years. And I think if you could kind of maybe go back and look at the list and build a schedule on the bigger ones. And then the new ones, go back and look at the new ones, and maybe we can clean up the statutes a little bit and move them out a year or two, because you're not really going to get information for a year, 18 months runs by.
I just need a little clarification, Mr. Chairman. We talked about number 22 with our former colleague. I'm looking at also 28, but over on the far right, it says eligibility restricted beginning 2013. Does that mean no one else can utilize these funds because that date was a cutoff date or a hard date that if they didn't use the incentives prior to that, they weren't eligible for that individual?
I would, okay, I would have to go and ask the Department of Revenue in this case for more information on that. I don't think the eligibility restricted means no one can participate. It's just there was a change in who was eligible to participate, but why it's a zero, why there's 0 claimants and no dollars there. If that's related to the eligibility restrictions, those would all be things we would look at if you selected something like that for us to review. I mean, that's stuff we could do.
My guess is on some of this, and I could be wrong, we haven't always been flush with cash. And some of this stuff probably got approved around 2013, but as different groups have come in, I could be wrong. They've cut some of this probably funding back on some of these programs. I don't know, maybe we could get someone from revenue, oh, Tamara's got something.
On number 22 specifically, I just pulled up the statute to see what happened in 2013. And basically, they said for tax year 2013 and all tax years thereafter, the tax credit provided by this section shall only be available to taxpayers subject to the income tax on corporations. So that was how they limited this particular one in 2013.
So it hasn't been used since 2013, evidently.
I can't speak to how it's been used since 2013, but that was the limitation put on it in 2013.
And I remember the swine facility improvement credit. I remember that battle we had over that. Could you look at that and tell me what the eligibility restricted beginning in 2013? If I remember correctly, that was one that dealt with the pollutants, the breaching of containment ponds, and foliants all over the field, saturation of that waste, so.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You're good. So I just pulled up that statute, and they added the exact same subsection in 2013. So again, it says for tax year 2013 and all tax years thereafter, the income tax provided by this section shall only be available to taxpayers subject to the income tax on corporations.
So is there any way to see if them have been used since then?
We could look and ask if that's information you all would like for this for those 2 credits for next time.
Go ahead, Representative Burrows.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I don't want to beat this poor horse to death. I'm just sitting here looking at, we always talk about the incentives that we have on the table and return on investment. It's one thing to have an incentive, but it's not being utilized, then how long are we going to keep it on the books? And if it's not meeting what we hoped it would meet back in 2013, maybe we need to either revamp it or just do away with it and write a whole new statute or offer another incentive. And that's kind of what I'm looking at here. Some of these, I've been here a while, I remember some of the discussion about these, like you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I know the number 22, 2006, I remember that as it went in.
Yeah.
I remember Representative Crable saying we were very foolish, and also I remember looking at that a few years later and seeing how much we spent, and no one realized we spent a lot of money. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Do we know what kind of return we got on it?
Well, I know I believe the refinery at McPherson expanded greatly. So we got more oil production. We got more probably gasoline in this region. I know, and them kind of facilities, they only go through them every so often. So I know they used that credit. I know there was Representative Holmes did 3 or 4. Some of them were dealing with like coal mines and different things. And I know some of them are being used, I believe, still today. So I could be wrong, but Representative Williams.
So you just help me find where you would find just property tax exemptions, not IRBs, but for example, if you had wind energy, there was a period where all the wind turbines, the wind farms came through. I know they came through my county, and they got a 99-year exemption.
They were a permanent property tax exemption prior to us redoing the legislation, which we'll start seeing a little bit, but it's all local. That's not a state.
True, but.
Just a smidget of its state.
True, and so that would kind of be opposite of what I said before. Let's don't focus on any of them that doesn't have any state dollars. But I just didn't know if it was listed anywhere here. I know on the transparency portal, it's supposed to capture all property tax exemptions as well, so that you can see that layering effect. So I just didn't know, because that would be an interesting to see, even though that's a local, it's still tax dollars.
No, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying.
Is it
we
on this
redid
list
that.
anywhere or no? It's because it's not a
Probably be on
program.
the KCCO, wouldn't it, or, I'm not for sure which agency would be over that. I don't know.
I,
Matt Sterling was here to ask him, but I don't know. It might be revenue, but it's property tax, so. Well, I know it's not law anymore, so. I know they have a 10-year abatement. I wrote the new version. They all have the same. And there was, in the House, an amendment offered in committee to make solar permanent. In conference, we reeled that back, and everybody has the same 10-year abatement. I believe we're year 8, 8.5, so we're about to see the effect of that bill here soon locally. There's actually going to be a lot of counties probably appreciate what we did there soon, because there'll be several $100 million tax base in some of them counties all of a sudden appear, and that'll probably help lower in them rural counties that need help. Property tax. Go ahead, Christian.
so I don't know the exact credit that you're thinking of and would have to look, but in terms again of what state law defines as those 5 buckets, it's really, the wording is any tax credit program. And the only sort of property tax exemption is the industrial revenue bond property tax exemption. So it's likely not on this list, the one that you're thinking of.
Representative Burrows.
I'm going to go back here to, let's look at 21 for just a moment. This, it says it's 9,000 for individuals, 10,000 for businesses. There's one individual using it and the revenue's confidential. Well, it's not, am I missing something here? That if one person's using it, it can't be more than 10,000 at the max.
Was that one person this year? Yeah.
So in fiscal year 2018, it looks funny because that word is wrapping over, but they're both confidential, the number of claimants and the amount. So I think the interpretation there is it's not 0, but it's not a very big number, which is why it's confidential.
Okay, so it'd be the same thing with 26 on the Port Authority and the small employer health plan. It's not necessarily that it's just one individual. It's a small enough number that we don't want to list them. Correct. So evidently it's less
Correct.
than probably 6.
Can you get, is that amount's confidential, the dollar amount that we're spending on the credit?
That goes back to the KDOR requirement about, I think that Representative Burrows you're referring to, but because they have some confidentiality cutoffs there, these are examples of where those numbers are just too small to report out.
I remember when we were looking at incentives early on, Mr. Chairman, years ago, that I came across this KDOR ruling because we were trying to see if the entities that utilized the first round of STAR bonds were meeting the criteria of meeting the funding level. And we couldn't get that information because it basically narrowed in on 1 or 2 individuals. And the Department of Revenue said, no, we're not going to share that information. And I find it odd that we're one of the few states that doesn't share that information with the legislature, but that's a battle that we've had decades ago, but that goes right back to the confidentiality stuff. So.
Well, and I mean, I think that's why in banking, you audit some of these like that just to make sure they're being done right. I mean, it's the old, in banking, I mean, I chaired the audit committee for a long time down there, and the biggest place we'd lose money is our tellers. They have a drawer that they carry for long periods of time, and money would go missing on Friday and then reappear on Monday. They call it Friday, Monday situation. So if you send your auditor in there on Saturday, once in a while, you normally don't have that problem. Because, you know, if you never send your auditor in on a Saturday, they think, hey, you know, and that's how fraud works. If you don't audit, and, you know, some of the things I look for, not only when I'm wanting you to audit, is I want suggestions how to make sure we got good controls in, how to make sure that we don't have just one person signing off on stuff. Make sure we've got, you know, duplication, you know, them are the kind of things you want to do, because you trust, but if you don't verify that trust, you know, that's when the fraud appears. And, you know, some of the best people that start small, just one little thing, got to ship my house. I mean, I've seen guys, you know, where we didn't have good controls in place, and they're over the cell phones and the iPads and all that. Next thing you know, they get them upgrades, they send them to their house. Started small, and over a 10-year period, you don't catch it, and, you know, $1.5 million. And, you know, so when you don't have someone, second person signing off, or the proper controls in place. And so that's some of the stuff I, as well as you're moving forward, if you got suggestions that we need to improve something, I think it'd be good. Well, so we got some homework. Anything else, Kristen?
Can I maybe recap what I think I heard today? So we'll come back next time and focus on, so make sure the ones we plan on at least sort of proposing that are in the schedule would be the ones that have a sunset date, including even if we've already reviewed it. So that would be Star Bonds, the Angel Investor Credit, Rural Opportunity Zones. We can maybe give you all an option that would consider, so there are some sunset dates on some of the newly created incentives. So again, then there's probably some discussion about timing there, and when does it make sense, given that we will have to review it already to at least some degree, and what might that next evaluation look like if you chose it. Or otherwise lean away from ones that we have already reviewed, so not JCF, not PEAK, not HPIP, and think more about incentives we have not yet reviewed.
And I think 3 years is probably something, at least for now, and the bigger ones. You can put them out 3 to 4 years, I don't know.
Well, my question would be, did we make any changes in the last 3 to 5 years on HPIP and PEAK? Because if we did, if we touched it, then I think we might want to consider it. We might not. I mean, it may just be in the list of, and it may not get selected. But if we're messing with things.
Well, we changed Star Bonds even, but
But
the
it's
fact
not
is,
sunset.
you know, we need to make sure we give them time. You know, them have been in effect. You've really, it takes a while to get information. You know, time goes into effect, went into effect July. So now we're probably a little over a year in effect. So you're just now starting to build your first year's information. You know, sometimes if you do it too quick, you don't get that first year. So I'd say just move them out 3 years, and then I think we'll be safe. And I'd pepper some small ones in there, just because we don't want people to think we're not looking at them, you know. Go ahead.
And by small ones, are we considering both economic development programs as well as tax credits? I mean, anything on this list?
Yeah, anything on the list, but, yeah.
And I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, any of the staff would be 100-hour audits to just bring those forward, and that starts making our list a little easier to look at. I mean, that's 100-hour audits. If I'm going back to the zero ones. If they look at it and get the information from Commerce or Revenue that we haven't used this program for years, it's just sitting there. One of the programs has been here for almost 40-some years. And so you don't know if it's been audited, when the last time it was audited or anything like that, but if a 100-hour audit works, please bring us forward to those suggestions.
Well, I don't think if it's at zero, I don't think we need to audit it. I mean, we know what the cost is, then it's more of a debate, do we need it? That's when, I guess if you audit it, it'll be more than 1 year, but if we haven't done anything since 2013, there's not a lot of relevant information except why is it there? You know. Go ahead.
I mean, a thought on that is you could direct us to look at a bunch of the ones that are zeros and basically talk about why they're not used, or if there's like a change that could make it more accessible to taxpayers, businesses,
Maybe build
that sort of thing.
on them, or they've been zero for so many calendar years, and then we can probably look at them as a committee, maybe start making a recommendation to, as we do legislation, to remove a few every year. Because if it hasn't been used for 9 or 10 years, then you've really got to ask yourself, why is it there? And all you're doing is you're recausing the debate to happen. Or you could sunset, well, you'd eliminate it, probably repeal it. Well, what I would say is if we haven't used it in 5 years, maybe we just bring it to the committee for discussion. Do we need to change it and propose a change, or propose elimination? So would you say, going back and looking at, talking to the different agencies if they've got one that hasn't been used over a 5-year period, because 5 years is a long time up here. If someone hasn't figured out how to fund it or need it, then the whole committee could have just be an automatic triggered discussion, and then we would propose either legislation to remove it or change it to where it's usable. Because what will happen on some of these are specialized need, they will serve their purpose and, take care of that problem, and then there's nobody else.
Well, the agency can also respond in a written letter as to, give us guidance as a committee, Mr. Chairman. They may come back to us after the questioning that the Commerce Department no longer sees this as being a benefit. We propose it to the committee and go that way with it.
Be a good way to be a repealer, and costs a little money to get rid of something that's costing us annually. I don't know. I think that guy got lost. Or gal. Okay, we got a little homework, and this is a good conversation. I really, I like it. I think we just, we get things on a schedule and just, these are all important. And the schedule can include repealing things too and cleaning things up, so. They'll re-update it. They re-update our folder every time.
My portable office,
So, okay, is there anything else you need? No?
I was just going to discuss the next meeting. So it's set for 2 weeks from today. So same time, same place. We'll come back with some suggestions or options based on your guys' discussion today. And there we will then ask for formal action from you all. So to take a vote on which ones you want to suggest, basically. And the plan is that we will then use that proposal to develop a formal audit proposal that'll go before the full LPAC committee, probably in December or whenever the winter meeting happens.
And so, yeah, this committee will have a meeting in 2 weeks. The legislative post-audit has a meeting next week. So we're going to be busy this month and Wednesdays. So, yeah. Any other questions? Okay. We're adjourned. Thank you.